Carl and Liam here from Games, Brains and Head-Banging Life, gbhbl.com for sure. And it's the big question, part of our 13 days of Halloween content. We are going to talk briefly about a horror game moment that lives rent-free in your head. That description is apt for this. I don't want to know about your favorite horror movie moment necessarily, or the ones that are iconic or anything like that. I'm talking about a moment that when you think of, or when it comes to mind, you're like, yep, that still fucks me up today, or that still terrified me, or scared me enough that it affected me, you know, mentally, that kind of thing. That's it. So it's just one each. It's simple as that. It's a nice short video. And I guess the problem with this was always going to be, where do you go? Do you go to the big ones? Do you go to the favorites? Do you go to your childhood? Do you go for something more modern? It's hard with modern because both of us, I'd imagine, are very hard to kind of have that effect on.
Yeah, that's the thing is at this point, that's why when I thought about this, it was actually quite tough because at least with modern horror games, sorry, like you're quite desensitized at this point to what we've seen through horror movies and stuff like that, and jump scares and stuff. So when they try and pull it out, it doesn't really necessarily have the impact that people that are making the games would want it to. And like you said, you don't want to go to the really classic child moments of Resident Evil, or the dog jumping through the window, or the liquor and things like that. But shall I start with my one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so mentioning Resident Evil, my one is actually from a Resident Evil game. It's from 4, and it's fighting the Iron Maiden in Resident Evil 4. And this is something that has just always creeped me out. And even going back and playing the remastered version, like it still gets me. It's I hate these things. The creepy music that plays, and they have this really like disturbing breathing sound that you can hear from like a distance. And yeah, they take a serious amount of ammunition to take down. You can blow off their legs, their limbs, and they'll still flop after you and slide around, and then they literally will regenerate if you don't finish them off. And just fuck those things, man. But just it's a really great soundtrack that also plays when they appear, and it's just Resident Evil 4. Like it doesn't have many moments in it that I would consider to be necessarily scary. It's quite an action-oriented game, but for me, like the Iron Maiden or the regenerators, like they are up there. It's like possibly the scariest monster that I think is in the franchise, but that's just me.
Interesting. It's certainly up there. I mean, I agree. The regenerators are amazing. The Iron Maiden, in specifically, I can't remember. You only fight like I think 2 of them, but they're the ones with the spikes on the body, which add a new level of like danger that comes from these monstrosities. But yeah, you say it immediately. I hear the sort of. It's not even like breathing. It's like panting almost. The breathing is like a pant almost, like it's struggling for breath.
It's like labored. It's like a labored gut. It's very. It's just. If I hear that, man, it creeps me out immediately. I remember a particular scene where you're caught in you're stuck in like a refrigerated unit type thing in like a laboratory, and there's like a bunch of them that are like on a line, like some kind of conveyor belt hung up on hooks, and like you just know that you see it, and you go in the room, and like typical Resident Evil, nothing happens. You're like, oh, it's just there to like freak me out, but you know something's gonna happen. And then as you finally get back to the door, it says the door's locked, and then one of them drops down, and like then you're stuck in like a really confined space with them. Because before that, you're in like corridors, you can run and get behind doorways and things like that, get away from them. But that situation, you're really like stuck in this tiny space, and yeah, it's always like a big battle when you face them. But like they're just creepy bastards.
Oh, they really, really are. It is an incredible choice because it really is, when it comes to the Resident Evil franchise, really difficult. If I was to start thinking, I'd probably start going to the modern times and probably look at Resident Evil 7 more than anything else than the original, because the original has been so overdone to a certain degree that it doesn't have that impact anymore.
Yeah, I always used to found like the character of Lisa Trevor, like she was obviously quite a scary figure, but then when you find out the tragic backstory, that kind of does change your opinion a little bit. But quite gruesome looking, obviously.
Absolutely. I had a real problem with this. In fact, I almost gave up on this one, was going to message you and say, look, I can't do it. Because there's just nothing that really works, because I wanted to keep it specific to horror game moment. If you ask me game moments that live rent-free, I start pulling out tons. Thomas Was Alone, Little Inferno, all these other experiences that had moments that disturbed me or upset me or bothered me, but a horror moment was really difficult. Yeah, and then I got reminded of something that really affected me in a way I didn't expect. And part of it comes from the fact that I did not expect this from this game. I'm going to talk about Bendy and the Ink Machine. So Bendy and the Ink Machine is got that cartoon style of, I don't know what they call it, like Cuphead, that imagery. I knew it was a horror game going into it. I was aware of that beforehand. And I was fascinated by the idea of combining the two elements, that sort of over-the-top cartoony line drawings and stuff like that, old school, with horror. But truth be told, I expected to be nothing but jump scares. It's not. It has jump scares, of course, but fuck me, is it atmospheric. And the opening sequence of that game, initially, have you played it, by the way?
I have not actually, no.
Okay, so the opening sequence of that game that takes place in the deserted Joey Drew Studios is the most uncomfortable, tension-based thing I'd played in years. The silence, the imagery, the realization, you just don't even have a clue what's really going on here. And then you're coming back down a hallway, and at the very end of that hallway, your eyes, and it's a long hallway, and your eyes will be like, the fuck's that? And then you'll see it pop back behind the, and it's like something pops back behind the wall, and holy shit, I shit a brick. To the point where I was like, I do not want to go around that corner. You don't want to. You go around that corner and you'll see a cardboard statuette of Bendy, which are a lot of them around. And then it sort of clicks and clots together that thing was looking at you a moment ago. And that there, the fact it flashed, and that in a big game as well, that has a lot more insane shit that comes up, a lot more terrifying sequences when you actually meet and experience Bendy as it properly is in the game. But that early scare of the cardboard cutout, because it's so far in the distance as well, it's not close to you, it doesn't happen in front of you, it's not a jump scare because of that. If it popped out in front of you, I'd been like, oh, you just jumped me. But it's in the distance and you're like, oh, there's something, and then it pops back and you're like, oh, that's the scare. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Sticks right there on my fucking head. Amazing.
Sounds really cool. But yeah, I think it is tough for someone like me and for you, because for a lot of normal people that maybe aren't as sensitized as us, there's probably like hundreds of moments that they can think of that could scare. I've played like so many games that have like great atmosphere that make you feel that creepy vibe, you know, from like Bioshock to Soma to like Amnesia. You know, there's quite a long list. Or you know, there's scary moments like in the original Condemned game with the mannequins following you, and Dead Space, of course, is a great one. There's loads of like great scary games, like, but they don't necessarily like get to you on that level, and maybe something like the moments we've mentioned do, you know, whereas other people might may find this a lot easier, kind of thing, you know.
No, I agree, because it would be, you know, it'd be easy to start pulling out these, but like I said, I wanted it to be specific in the fact that when you think of something, and it might not even be at the forefront of your mind, but then it comes crawling out like a fucking monster out of the sludge to remind you that, yeah. And for me, my choice was based on the fact that in a modern day, because my player Bendy and the Ink Machine was only about 2 or 3 years ago. So like, that's modern, and you got me. You freaked me out. You made me uncomfortable, and I played that game with a tense feeling all the way through. So like, well, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to do for us. So if you manage to do it, then it must be impressive.
It is, and that's it. That's what we wanted to keep this one tight and short. That's our choices of horror game moments that live rent free in our heads. We are going to have another video. Go check it out, and we're going to do a horror movie moment.
Thank you very much for watching. If you liked what you saw, please help us out by giving us a thumbs up and hitting that subscribe button. If you really liked what you saw, consider donating to keep the website and channel running by buying us a coffee via our coffee page or picking up some merch from our Big Cartel store. You can check us out on gbhbl.com as well as via our social media, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, as well as listen to our interviews via SoundCloud, Apple Music and Spotify. Just search for GBHBL. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?